Greetings, brave adventurers! My name is FoxyBard, and I am here to regale you with some RPG horror stories today. Now, because Wednesday was particularly horrifying, here's the video if you haven't watched it yet, I'm going to be taking it a little bit easier with these. They're gonna be not quite as bad. They're more the fun kind of bad than the horrifying kind of bad. All of them are taken from the subreddit r/RPG horror stories, and we are just gonna get right into it. So, grab a seat around the fire, and let's dig into more tales of role-playing. Our first story today is brought to us by the user Admiral Swordfish. It is entitled, "Where's My War Elephant? Where's My War Elephant?" Quote from Bart Simpson, and also this player. That pretty much sums it up. Let's get right into it. Tale start. This was in a campaign I was a part of as a younger teenager more than 10 years ago. The campaign itself could fill several posts in terms of the horror stories, but this one sticks out the most in my memory in terms of how daft it was. It was a different type of horror. We're a standard party of 5, all roughly the same age, except for the DM. We run one of the intro dungeons, and no issues for a session or two. It's when a player, A, after every encounter started saying, "I loot the room!" Somebody played Munchkin. It started off as a joke. It quickly became part of his routine that he would think if he said it first after combat, he could get all the gold. The DM didn't indulge it, thankfully. We just ended up getting a lot of gold instead. Weird compensation mechanic, but I digress. This meant that we had a big chunk of change to spend in town. This town was a standard fantasy Western European medieval town. Nothing special about it. By Milani, that sentence took me like 5 takes. We go to the general store/blacksmith. NPC asks what sort of things we're looking for. Players B through E, potions, a new sword, some better armor. Player A, a war elephant! We're all a bit confused at first, thinking it's another joke. The DM explains why that wouldn't be feasible. The logistics predominantly, but also where would a general shopkeeper in a humdrum medieval town know the context to acquire, train, and transport a war elephant? Player A doubles down. It's in the PHB. I have enough gold for it. I want a war elephant. He doesn't get one. He sulks for several sessions, occasionally makes snarky comments about how he should be able to get one in a fantasy game. The DM doesn't give in, thankfully. I don't think they ever understood just because it's in the book doesn't mean it's in that exact game. The campaign gradually descended into horror story territory, then involving assaults, canine-based cruelty, and DM creeping, but that's a post for another time. Needless to say, as soon as we all reached the age to head off to university, we all jumped ship from that game and DM as quickly as we could. Us other players are still really good friends, and a big part of our bond is the shared trauma of playing in that campaign. Just when I was starting to like this DM, darn it. We didn't keep in touch with the DM and Player A. I don't think he'll ever get his war elephant. Tale end. There's something about a story that's technically still a horror story, but more funny than anything else, which this one definitely qualifies for. It's kind of a shame that it sounds like this whole group started to devolve by the end. Mostly the DM's fault. I kinda liked him at first, and then I guess it went downhill. Oh well. Now, let it be known, I am not a stickler for extreme realism in RPGs. They're supposed to be fun, first and foremost, and realism can sometimes ruin that a little bit. But that said, of course a small Western European style fantasy town isn't gonna have a war elephant. Now, had the player asked, is there a way for me to get one eventually, Well, that could have been a cool plot point. You could have done something really fun with that, maybe have side quests, and yeah, that could be a lot of fun. Like, how do you get a war elephant in this kind of climate or culture? But that wasn't what happened. Also, what the crap was the voice for that character, Foxy? Come on. Let's just move on to the next story. Our next story is by the user UnhappyTechnician68. It is titled The Tale of Sir Murder Hobo, Kleptomaniac, and it goes on. And the player who doesn't understand why D20 is called the D20 system, a case study in player entitlement. Wow, that took like several breaths. It's a long title. Now, for those of you who like to read along, I apologize in advance. This story has some incredibly long paragraphs. I've tried to do something with the video editing to make them a little bit easier to keep up with and parse. So, let me know if it worked. Yay, experimenting with new things. Anyway, tale start. Hey y'all, here to complain about players I had because one of them just complained about my game in a group chat we are in. The game in question took place more than a year ago. I've been a DM for 12 years now. I've run 8 groups. My second group was the best. We played for 4 years. It was so much fun. I currently have a good group. We've been playing for 8 months now, and 'tis going very well. We strike a nice balance of serious, silly, it's fun. But this group I am about to discuss was a nightmare. Cut to me 1 year ago, just before the pandemic, trying to run a group and get my friend involved. Only one of them has played an RPG before, but I was his DM, but the 2 other players were literally drug addicts. We lived in a ski town and all of us partied a lot, but these 2 were like bringing MDMA to the games and missing sessions because they hadn't managed to get to bed before 2 p.m. after going out. So, needless to say, the group fell apart, but it was fun while it lasted. In any case, me and Player 1, as we will call him, roped in 2 other people, a guy and a girl. We play board games and improv games with regularly. They are both reasonably smart, creative, and charismatic, and most importantly, will actually show up for sessions. Ooh, yeah, that's a big one. We have trouble agreeing on a setting. I hate classic Fantasyland. It's boring to me. I do not want to play in a world made by reshuffling Tolkien tropes, or at least not too shuffled. My players, on the other hand, want to just play in a bland world with RuneScape-level lore. Hey, don't knock RuneScape lore. I actually don't know any RuneScape lore. I come up with a compromise and a game that I think will satisfy us both. I create the world of Cinder. 100 years ago, it was a world of wonders, high fantasy, where everyone lived basically like Harry Potter wizards. Then, for reasons now forgotten, the world was thrown into the equivalent of a magical nuclear war, where the magical engine that had powered their society were turned into nukes that ripped the world apart, sending them back into the Stone Age. Magic storms rip across the ash wastes, turning crops to glass or raining acid. Portals to worlds destroyed spew out magic storms. But in a few places, warded from magic, life is pretty much the same. They live in a classic forest town, protected by an archfey and his husband. So there is this section of the world that is nice and pretty and very much classic Fantasyland, but when they go outside it, it's like Fallout, but with magic. I like the concept and hope to sell them on it. It's a weird world where you can do whatever you like. You can ride things other than horses. Your character can come from other universes, or be from another time. Do whatever you want. In retrospect, I think this bred a toxic amount of player entitlement. Player 1 rolls up a classic edgelord rogue. Immediately I smell trouble. He is already going on about how much stuff he plans to steal from NPCs in town, constantly. Also, when I asked him stuff about his character, He got weird and angry. Asking him where his character sleeps in town or where he likes to get food made him angry.
I don't want to decide things about his day-to-day life.
Next, the other guy, who thinks this is going to be Skyrim or World of Warcraft. He at one point asked if I could implement a crafting system. Ooh, what fun that would be. Rolls up a paladin with no particular god in mind at all, refuses to even describe what deity the guy follows, and seems to just drift between any alignment he wants. Fine, whatever, he's going to be Sir Murder of Hobo. Also, the guy has a bit of a rat fetish. His symbol is a rat, his steed is a giant rat. Whatever, it was pretty funny, so I allowed it. The girl in our group rolls up a druid who is separated from her tribe, names the druid using an African name rather than some Celtic one. I really like this character concept, and thought there was hope for this group yet. I really tried to incorporate what they wanted into the session. I allowed the rogue to steal from townsfolk and gave him a tower like the one Aladdin has to sleep in and hide from guards. I even used this as a way to introduce the big bad, as an apparently senile old man who would be easy pickings was actually a really powerful warlock who had some of the town guards under a spell and was planning to open a portal to some abyssal plane or destroy the town they live in, which is the only livable land for hundreds of miles. This would prompt the player's main quest to find a new place to move the town. But they barely left the Shire before things had begun to unravel. Essentially, what ended up happening is this constant pattern of them having no sense of direction. Two of them never even bothered to learn how to play D&D. Asking Sir Murder of Hobo or the Druid to roll any skill check prompts the question, "What die do I roll?" And this is after like 2 months of playing. It's a d20, guys. It's a d20. Player 1 has to tell both other players what modifiers their characters are using. This leads to a situation where the Druid and Sir Murder of Hobo don't even understand what their players are really good at, or even get salty after they fail a roll. They constantly did things that put themselves in unnecessary danger, like eating poisonous wildlife, and then they would complain when they experienced consequences. Story has conflict, but they didn't want to experience conflict. All they wanted to do was just collect random magic items. They didn't really even want to follow any storylines and would complain about any plot at all. I felt like all they wanted was for me to make up a goblin warlord called Dirk de Burr, and he is bad and coming to ruin the town. Which, as a DM, is no fun for me. I want to create plot twists and force players to make hard choices that ratchet up the tension. They wanted to have pen and paper Stardew Valley. Needless to say, we stopped playing. Despite numerous attempts and conversations to understand what they wanted and how to compromise with them, it just ended with them stopping coming to the session. I wish I had walked away first, because I spent a month trying to write content for them and hating it. Anyway, they go to another person who is interested in being a DM. She runs a game with them, but 2 months later, the game stops. I went to her birthday and we talked for 2 hours about how horrible that group was. In this other DM's words, I tried to get them to play D&D, but all they wanted to do was weird crap. She gave them a storyline which required them to fix 4 things in the world, but no, it was too much. Only player 1 could follow the story. The Druid, who was now playing a warlock of an archfey, still couldn't understand how to play, and neither could Sir Murder of Hobo, who would be presented with story hooks and then go to a bar instead. I think I know a few people like that in real life. Why roleplay being in a fantasy world if what you want to do is what you do anyway? And player 1 refused to take notes and was literally a hobo. Again, I guess to avoid feeling pinned down by the DM or some crap. This other DM stopped playing when they were in a dungeon and the players had split the party of their own free will, and player 1, who was playing a bard, was trying to sleep with her big boss for that dungeon. She felt that they just came to games to mock and insult her world, and that her efforts were pointless. I felt vindicated. Whew, tail end. That definitely did sound like an incredibly frustrating group. But I think what that was that the DM had good ideas, and the players just didn't really want to play D&D. Honestly, I would have recommended them to play something like Munchkin or Red Dragon Inn. Both of those games are excellent for the type of play that they seem to want to do. They're more short form, they're less structured, there's less of a story, and they're just kind of silly and fun. I think for a group like that, games like that would just be perfect. Actually, in one of my games I'm running, I had my players play Red Dragon Inn in character. As in, their characters were taking on each of the characters in Red Dragon Inn. So each player was playing a character who was playing a character. It was a lot of fun. I highly recommend just play Red Dragon Inn with your gaming group. It's a blast. It's a great game. Hashtag not sponsored. Yeah. Ooh, I wanted to mention though, Dirkbadur, the Goblin Warlord. I kind of want to use that. That's a great name for a Goblin Warlord. Yeah, I love Dirkbadur. Anyway, this is something that could have been easily fixed with a session 0 and discussing expectations, because it really didn't sound like this group wanted to play D&D. It's okay to talk with your players and reevaluate what you're doing. You don't have to keep playing D&D. You can play other games. There's a lot of great ones out there. Oh, that will do it for today, though, because Wednesday was so rough. It's still hitting me a little bit, and my sleep schedule last night has just been awful. I'm recording this at 5:30 in the morning on Friday. Shut up. Just know that I love you guys too much to let you go a Friday without a good video. Which, that brings us to the YouTube stuff section of the video. Remember to like and subscribe, do all that cool YouTube stuff, leave a comment, just all the things that help me fight off that algorithm monster. You can also join the FoxyBard community Discord server, it's down in the description below. It's a really active place with some great people, and we'd love to have you. That will do it for Foxy today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. But for now, though, let's douse the fire and get back to our own adventures.